Hello. So right now I'm moving apartments, and while doing that, I remembered one idea that I didn't want to miss, and I wanted to record it straight away. So something that I feel like um, has has been happening for the past like 6 to 8 years is that the designer's role has been changing so much that I feel like in a couple of years it will be non-existent. And I will explain why, and I would even urge people to really stop hiring designers. And I'm saying this as a designer myself. I'm saying this because this was my craft from 2008. I've been in it for so long, and I feel like major shifts are happening that no one is really talking about, either because no one is really understanding that, or because people understanding that but they're not incentivized to talk about. So I feel like there are two reasons why basically UI and UX designers will be either replaced or I would say made redundant. And this is an important distinction because I feel like the functions of those will still be in the role, in the play. But the hiring process for them will be way different. What I mean by that is that right now UI designers pretty much operate in a very, very defined stage where very rarely they think about new conventions of the design. Usually they just reuse the same components, the same Lego bricks for years, for decades almost, where they have like the sidebar for B2B apps, they have the form which consists of name and kind of the input field and the submit button and different variations of those things. And even AI, which was promising a lot of new conventions into the design and into the development world, unfortunately, because it's so much trained on previous data, it's almost like suggesting the same exact things but a little bit more efficiently. So I think generally for UI designers, there are two paths to go from this. The first one is, okay, three paths. I would start with zero. You can continue doing what you were doing, right? You can take more clients on B2B, on B2C, you can design experiences for them. But most likely, if you will keep doing just the same way you were doing it before, it will become less and less useful or valuable for people because majority of those conventions are already turning into boilerplates and will continue turning into easier way to create them, into constructors of B2B, into the integration constructors, and so on and so on. So one other thing that you can do is actually go into the real innovation over interfaces. This is something that I did with my studio. I very early on realized that I'm first of all very bored of doing the same exact things, the same B2B apps of some sort. I really want to question where, for example, if AI appears, where will it actually go? How does it appear? Should it be chat or should it be like a ambient assistance across the thing? How does it take the context from where you're working on, and how basically at which points of the experience you can work with it. And the real innovation comes not from like recoloring some things, but actually looking at the whole flow, at the real kind of final need, and trying to come up with some absolutely new navigation patterns or absolutely new ways to work with text or editing or writing or composing or orchestrating or using some kind of extra inputs for that. And being focused on that thing really gave me a lot of benefits on being on the current market, and it really helps me to speak with people who are at the edge of AI and the edge of the technology to really prioritize what is the real kind of need that we want to do right now. And I feel like the more and more like we will see that that happening. The third path that designers can go, and I feel like this is the safest path, is actually design engineering, or this is how they call it, but basically it's a front-end work. And one good argument that immediately can be splashed into my face is that, hey, you just said that many things are automating. Why are you suggesting another quite manually labor work? I think that there is still going to be a lot of space where not the design itself is important, but design implementation is very important. And what I mean by that is the optimization part, the part where you nail the milliseconds of some kind of animations, of making them really sharp and correct and very accurate and very specific to some ideas. I feel like that's going to be so important that it's actually going to consume UI, classical UI role, because your job will translate from designing, the perfect inputs in Figma into designing the perfectly working inputs in real code. And I feel like this is very, very important. And I know many people claim about designers should code. I always kind of disagreed with that because of, first of all, how popular it is, and I'm a little bit of a snob, but I also felt like there is a clear distinction of what code you should learn, right? And as a person who is very empathetic to maybe users, you could actually, tailor the code that is very, very close to users. So thinking about how to speed up things and how to make them easier and how to make them more polished. And unfortunately, the tools that designers have are really not keeping up. Unfortunately, Figma doesn't have so many tools about the little details, animation, processing, like even the prototyping issue. I know there are many things that you can do, but sometimes I feel like I'm just rebuilding the same app that someone could build already in code. Why I'm doing this in the fake environment with the same amount, work that someone could actually develop it. So I would actually more prefer to work on a real kind of deployed app and make some changes and see how it interacts with the real data and seeing how it works. I feel like many times it's just, a more straightforward way to see the real picture rather than focus on Figma and see, how it operates there. Another thing that I'm quite impressed is at how poorly the UX design have been showing itself for the past decade. What I mean by that is that many times, more and more, I noticed across the board that UX designers were actually either lazy or this is just a natural progression of all insights becoming quite obvious. It's like they're not coming with any life-changing or interface-changing insights many times, and it's not their fault. It's due to people's nature that we kind of discovered we know people quite good. We know people are lazy, impatient, jealous, angry, they have these humanity just have so many predictable emotions at this point that that, hey, your app should be quick, your app should have at least the least friction possible, your app should be always transparent and very readable and clearly understandable, very responsive, and so on and so on. And there is no real kind of value in that. There is a kind of subtext where, for example, I really value right now the brand research, because it doesn't really take the behavior parts of what kind of human how they will behave on this screen. It's more like, hey, how we can take this kind of segment of time, for example, this months, and kind of track the sentiment of people and what kind of sentiment we can reuse in copy, in the interface, in company, in business model, in the interface itself. And I feel like there is way more kind of nuance in brand research right now rather than in UX research, because majority of those testings that I witnessed, I would really doubt them, because I know that many times they are presented as this really nice decks where they can show hey, we just spoke with these people, 73% when they couldn't 20% couldn't find this button, and so on and so on. But it's actually, first of all, it's not testing it on the real kind of environments, which is way more kind of real data if you would think about it. And second of all, it's actually less and less useful just with time. The return on investment doesn't make sense to me, at least. So I think that's another thing, another nail into the coffin of the classical design job. And it's very important, I think, to kind of understand this, take this as what's happening with the industry, and then make your according changes. But there is a lot of optimism. I feel like designers, for example, who were on the market for the last 10 years were particularly sensitive to the nuance, relevance, taste, details, and I feel like those things are quite poorly explained in the modern world. Many people claim they have taste. It's almost like, they have this, it's very important for them to claim they have taste. And I feel like it's, first of all, people have probably different senses of taste and different definition of taste. But I also think that really AI and, all the social networks really showed how little taste people have, and it's not their fault. It's not someone's fault, or not even the education of the system, and so on and so on. It's more like the taste requires a lot of really physical practice over some craft, and it's very hard to fake it. You will always spot someone who didn't spend like thousands of hours on doing some craft, and you will spot it, and you will see how poorly they are actually judging about others' craft, or about their craft, or about the craft of their competitors or friends. So it's really interesting to witness that probably designers spend so much time in Figma, and it was so kind of addicting to many designers that maybe they could leverage that to get a new kind of things and to bring it to new practices that I've mentioned before, which is going to be more either engineering parts of the jobs or more branding or business parts of the job, where they have to design not the experiences but experiences of the business as a whole, like brand design or business design, if I can say. But it's very, very nuanced role. I honestly feel like business design can be done by someone who didn't work in Figma at all. So it's very interesting of who will claim that space and who will actually operate with it. One strong signal that I clearly see is that the taste is very, very clear by what people want. I'm building right now a product that allows people to set some kind of goals for their life. It's a very side project type of joke, almost like a joke, product as a joke. But one thing that I noticed is that the quality of what people put into that product really makes me understand what kind of taste they have. And this is very interesting because I'm not sure if others see others as well, but I almost like finding right now a very niche definition of taste. It's like taste is what you want. Basically, taste is what you define as your dreams or as your goals, and it tells me so much about you in different ways. It's also gave me so much about me. I realized where my taste is, and of course I might be absolutely super biased, and my taste might be also off. I still think it's good, but I might be off as well, right? And I feel like if people who are working in the design industry will understand how to manage taste, not only from the employers or people they're working with, but also from customers, and what kind of taste changes they want to see, and how to appear tasteful in front of your customers, that would really bring a lot of meaningfulness to this work and to these kind of roles, because it will play on totally another field than before. And I feel like the last kind of thing that I also noticed about taste is that the Midjourney and a lot of tools that were used for generation of pictures also show taste. That it's not about the execution part of how hard was it to generate this kind of photo or illustration, but it's more like, did you use the first set of generations after your prompt, or did you make a lot of generations until you found something that really makes sense, that is really undistinguishable and unidentifiable from the real art or something? And I feel like those tools are so powerful that you can definitely get amazing results from it, but majority of people don't. And many people who are writing newsletters, I noticed they started using more and more AI images. They were really using poor images, they, for example, I need to show an internet, and they just type internet and they take the first image from the Midjourney, claiming that it's, very, very unique or very, very innovative. But in fact, I can already predict that it's going to show some kind of blue laptops and kind of things flowing around, connecting with some kind of blue dots and lines. It's because it's built on the past systems and on the past training sets that was thinking in this way, and without a lot of prompting and a lot of ideas of what kind of taste you expect to see or want to deliver to your customers, you will never be able to jump into it. So getting a little bit looped back to why you don't need to hire UI or UX designer, or why do you have to change your roles, I feel like the final conclusion is that the taste making or the taste sensitivity or the taste research is another role that you can go through, and it will be just a way more powerful role than any others. And not many people yet defined the roles, the tools, the processes for this role. We don't know about this. But for example, many people can absolutely by memory, recall all of the UX research steps, and it draws way less, value than something like a taste research on the market thing. So I think there's definitely a lot to unpack, and I definitely jumped a few topics across, but I really wanted to, to contribute to this because this note was living in my Apple Notes for years. So I want to continue exploring this, and I'm also might be building a new tool for taste making, which I feel might be very interesting, especially if it's going to respect all kinds of taste and promote a good taste, or promotes the vector of taste, like in which direction do you want to explore your taste making and how to build on that. But that's pretty much it. I hope it was enjoyable to look at, and please argue with me in the comments. Thank you so much. See ya.